Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism. It is my honor to convene this daily conversation about what's happening around COVID-19 in various aspects of the crisis. Today, we're going to be talking about a very important topic that is sometimes getting lost because of all the very unusual stories and angles that are on the front page every day. And that topic is about immigration. And we have two fabulous professors here to help us understand the issues and to take your questions. Please share this with your family and friends around the world so that they can join us. Share this on your WhatsApp group. Find me on Twitter and share this. Find me on Facebook and share this. Find me on YouTube and hit like. This is your chance to bring people around the world into this conversation. And please tell us where you're watching from as well. Our guests are Professor Anil Kalhan, who's at Kalhan on Twitter. He's a Drexel University Kline School of Law and a visiting scholar at the Center for the Study of Law and Society at UC Berkeley. We're also joined by Professor Elizabeth Cohen at Elixabeth, I love that name, on Twitter, professor at Syracuse University and author of Illegal: How America's Lawless Immigration Regime Threatens All. And they are going to be our experts who will help us understand this topic. Before we get to them, a reminder, please share this with your family and friends right now on every way that you know. Take the link, put it on email, put it on WhatsApp, share with your friends, tag them. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and on Facebook. I want to hear from you. We want to take your questions. But before we do all that, we have to pay some bills. So let's go to our sponsors. We want to thank SownSocialMediaSolutions.com. Survive with Live Video Bootcamp. Starting June 1st, launch your own consistent live stream show in just 8 weeks. Learn how to get and keep your message out there, building relationships with your customers and potential customers during a time when it's needed most. Learn to get past the fear of going on camera, what to talk about when you're live, the tech, how to promote your videos, and actually launch your show in a supportive community of professionals. Please go to SownSocialMediaSolutions.com. Sohn Social Media Solutions, SOHN. And at the end of the show, Tim Sohn is going to join us for a few minutes to just talk about his course. We're also sponsored by one of my courses, Muckrack Academy. We're so excited to present Fundamentals of Social Media for Journalists, PR pros, and everyone. A free certification course. Save your seat right now, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. And this is aimed at all ages, well, above 13, all ages, all experience levels, all professions. You will benefit from taking this class because we want to get everybody to have the fundamentals of social media right. And if you know a little bit of something, you can brush up on it. You can also get the latest material. All of that we will do in about 2 hours. And you'll get a certificate at the end of it. It's kind of a on-demand course. It will launch in June, early June, but save your seat today. mrac.co/social. Take a screenshot right now or use your camera and take a photo so that you can get this free course, Fundamentals of Social Media, a free certification course. All right, are you ready to talk about U.S. immigration? I know you are. You have lots of questions. Tell us where you're watching from. With people watching from all over the world. We're going to start with our friends and see who's here. Paula Kiger is sitting down to dinner, but says a quick hello from Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you, Paula. Paula's part of my team. We do incredible productions, including, I want to tell everybody, yesterday on our New York Times read-along, where we read the New York Times every Sunday morning from 8:30 to 10:30 a.m. And we had Rick Wilson, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 2 books. One of them is called Running Against the Devil, and the other is Everything Trump Touches Dies. And he's a Republican. And Steve Shale, who is a Democratic strategist, and Kanika Monga, who is an MD who came in to talk to us about the medical aspects of COVID. And that was just at 8:30 in the morning. And we had more than 67,000 people watch us live because of what is known as the Rick Wilson effect. And Rick Wilson is a huge following on social, so that's what happens. But now we're ready to bring you our guests. Let me bring them on, and they will get a chance to talk to you right now. Please welcome Professor Cohen. Hello.
Hey there.
And Professor Kalhan.
Hello.
What is this? The Kalhan Cohen show? I don't know which, how that goes.
We only do alliterative work here.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for being here. We're very grateful on a Monday night. I know you have a lot going on. I start my show by asking the simple question of each of my guests. How are you? Where are you? How's your family? So Elizabeth, to you first.
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. I'm in Syracuse, New York. I miss my family very much. They're in New Jersey, and I'm hoping to join them soon as we're allowed to. But they're well too, and we're grateful and lucky, and hoping that the same is true of everybody who's on tonight.
And do you find that where you are there, the opening is happening? What is the story?
I'm hearing about it. I haven't been out that much to check it out. We are getting very specific instructions about phased opening in New York, and I'm fortunate to be in upstate New York, where I've noticed a lot of compliance with lockdown since it's been in effect. And although there have been some real tragedies, the numbers have certainly not approached anything like what downstate is experiencing.
Yeah, that's a term that most people may have never heard before, right? Downstate is what people in upstate New York call.
It's a gigantic state.
Yeah, and but it's something that most people haven't heard, and it makes sense. If there's an upstate, there's a downstate, but normally you don't hear about it because, again, kind of the New York centricity of the media and things like that. But welcome, Elizabeth, and thank you for being here. We're very grateful. Let's say hello to Anil. Hi, Anil. Tell us how you are and where you are.
I'm doing well, Sree. Thanks so much. I am in Oakland, California. I normally am on the East Coast teaching at Drexel University in Philadelphia, but I have been on research leave this semester. So I've been spending the semester at the University of California at Berkeley, but in fact, mostly on Zoom. And but I feel very fortunate that everyone in my life is doing well, and they're getting a little stir crazy like everyone else, but I think about how fortunate I am many times every day.
Sure, and I totally understand that, and I'm glad everybody's okay. So let's get into it. Let's show people. We call this our global tour of who's watching. Pradnya says Anil Kalhan, and she's watching from Silver Spring, Maryland. Joe Appio is watching from right outside Atlanta. Geeta Narayan's watching from Memphis. And Tim Sohn says, thank you for creating these shows. He's our sponsor. We're so grateful to him. Jonathan Borstein has watched 68 straight shows, if you can believe it. And he's covered in Union Square in Manhattan. Sonali says, hello. Tim says, what's your secret for having so much energy? We'll talk about that offline. And Shahid says, tell me more about immigration. So we'll come back to him. And there's so many comments just coming in. Vishal has a question. I'm a student in F1 status. I'm planning to travel to India from July, August. Will there be any issues while returning back to the US? So we want to make it clear. Our guests today are professors who understand US immigration better than almost anybody, but they may not be able to or want to answer specific legal and immigration questions. We already did a show with 2 immigration lawyers, and if there's enough interest, we'll do that too. But today we're talking policy, bigger picture. Would that be fair to say, Anil? That's how we're framing this?
Yeah, I think that's right.
You don't want to answer each of these questions, but these are all good questions. And
absolutely.
We'll see, how that goes. So why don't we start with you, Anil? Frame the immigration story for us now. Where and what is the Trump administration doing in terms of immigration that is, to use a word that everyone says, unprecedented, but then how often do you use that word?
Yeah, so, we're now 3 years into a presidency that has been engaged in a large-scale, comprehensive crackdown on immigration, both undocumented and unauthorized, and legal, in a very comprehensive way. So it shouldn't really be all that surprising that with the pandemic, the Trump presidency would be seeking to extend that crackdown. We saw about a year and a half ago the use of emergency powers by the Trump presidency leading to a government shutdown. That was what we might call a bogus emergency. Here we have a real crisis, obviously a real crisis that all of us experience and really feel every day. But the immigration responses have not really been genuine responses to that crisis, in the sense that they really aren't really tied to any public health basis in a lot of respects. Some particular measures that have been implemented might have a public health basis in the same way that the shelter at home orders have, but they haven't really been used as public health measures. I would regard these as really extensions of the crackdown that we have seen. And the anxiety, I think, that a lot of people who think about immigration are feeling is that will they be used as a pretextual way to just simply outlast whatever public health basis might exist right now for action?
And that's something that we all need to be paying attention to. Elizabeth, let's get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Anil said. I look at this and I see actors who were seeking out reasons to close the borders, to try and stop immigrants from entering the country or stop foreign-born people from entering the country, and also to deport as many people as possible, to incarcerate people before deporting them. I see this as the culmination of a decades-long campaign to try and reduce immigration or stop immigration, and to kind of impoverish the rights of people in this country who are foreign-born, including in some cases people who've naturalized. It's not the first time in U.S. history that something like this has happened. So I feel like sometimes we use the word unprecedented for effect because we want people to understand just how serious the consequences of these actions are. But at the same time, I think it's important to recognize that there have been moments in U.S. history in which we've been caught up in nativist panics before, in which we've been grossly abusive of foreign-born people in the country, and in which that's turned out to be a bad decision in every possible respect. So I look at what's happening now and I see opportunists, but I'm not totally surprised by specific policies and the pretextual use of often unrelated events to apply to immigration.
And that's certainly one of the issues that we have to kind of wrestle with, this is one of the things, Anil, you and I have sometimes talked about this, that if on a scale of 1 to 10, if everything's an 11 or a 15, how do you know when to pay attention? And a lot of people aren't paying attention as a result of that. Let's also take a step back, Anil, if you can kind of give us the sense of where immigration stands in kind of American history or the American firmament. So, we have Shahid asking about immigration, or we have people calling in asking about what are our rights, what should we know? Elizabeth wrote a whole book about illegal issues and, whether it's undocumented or all these other terms. But just, can you give me a kind of top level view of immigration? And then we'll get Elizabeth to give us her take as well. So
top level, small question, Sree, top level view of all of immigration. We're at a moment, as Elizabeth says, and as her excellent book, which everyone should read if you're interested in these issues. We're at a moment where there's been a long effort to resist the expansion of immigration since the 1960s. The immigration has increased. The number of people who are foreign-born in the United States is at a high point. It is not unprecedented in the sense that we have had periods simultaneously of backlash and openness at the same time. I think we sometimes think about immigration in U.S. history as cyclical, right? Where there's like cycles of openness and then periods of backlash. But the reality is that all of American history is we have both openness and welcoming of immigration and xenophobia at the same time. This is a long-standing tension. and a struggle that has existed in the moments that we sort of think about as periods of one or the other. They're both going on, and the contention is there, with a certain kind of push and pull between them. But we are clearly at a moment where the strength of more restrictionist forces is ascendant. But at the same time, we also have seen in response to that, especially under the Trump presidency, a resurgence in perhaps even a greater awareness of immigration issues that among people who are sympathetic. So, in some ways, the openness and welcoming of immigration, the public opinion in support of immigration has in fact increased under the Trump presidency to some extent. So these are there are more paradoxes in American history than I think we sometimes recognize and acknowledge.
Yeah, and we're now people watching from around the country. Bruce Miller's watching from Seattle. Thank you. Kavita is watching from New York. And Mark Lee just finished his show. He had Rosa Clemente on, and she was talking about immigration rights as well. And Mark is in Durham, North Carolina. And Valsa is watching from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Look at this. We've got a whole U.S. tour there. So let's go to Professor Cohen, who is at Syracuse University, political science professor. Let's talk about her book, and we'll just call it up on screen again. I know you like to see it there. And it's called Illegal: How America's Lawless Immigration Regime Threatens Us All. If I may say, if somebody is reading just that second half of the title, they may not be clear what side you're talking about, right? It could be interpreted as that the American immigration is broken from either way. So let's make it clear what side you're talking about.
Yeah, so the title of the book is, first of all, authors often don't write their own headlines, as many journalists know, and that applies to book authors as well. And whether it's a good title or a bad title, I can't claim credit for it. I wrote everything else in the book, but the title is intended to provoke people in a couple of different ways. First of all, to convey that immigration enforcement in the United States is composed of a bunch of different agencies who, in a variety of ways, either are kind of exempt from restrictions that other law enforcement agencies are controlled by, or kind of push up against restrictions, just don't obey rules that they're supposed to obey. So there's lawlessness in that sense. And then also I wanted to convey in the book that if you have a sense that there's a really sharp distinction between citizens and non-citizens that makes it absolutely impossible for you as a citizen, if that's how you identify or how the government identifies you, might be protected from things and therefore don't have to worry about what ICE or Customs and Border Protection do. Well, that's not necessarily true. So that's kind of what the title is intended to convey. And in the book, I take a backwards look at how we got to this point, and then also talk about what's happening right up until pandemic, which is exactly when the book came out.
In Illegal, Elizabeth Cohen reveals that our current crisis has roots in early 20th century white nationalist politics, which began to reemerge in the 1980s. Since then, ICE and CBP have acquired bigger budgets and more power than any other law enforcement agency. So that's one of the ways that you have framed this. And tell me about the reaction to the book, and tell me about those who argue that things are not broken. This is in fact by design, and this is where we ought to be. One of my former students has written I think one of those articles that will be, kind of a marquee article of the Trump presidency. And when people say, oh, it's so cruel how they're treating the kids at the border. It's cruel they're taking people off of food stamps. And his article in the Atlantic, the headline was, "The cruelty is the point." And so when someone critiques the current immigration policy and says it's broken, look at this, this, and this, they say that's the whole point. We don't want these people here. So can you talk about that, Elizabeth, and then Anil?
Yeah, so you can kind of, there's many different angles to attack that question. Anil is, I think, made a really important point that public opinion doesn't really track with public policy, in the sense that if you ask reasonably kind of unbiasing questions about how people feel about immigration and immigrants themselves, you get generally supportive responses, not 100% of the population, to be sure, but this is really policy being made by a campaign that's been going on for a long time. And if you look at kind of inflection points like 1993 attack on the World Trade Center, and then the September 11th attacks, and then a few events that were going on in between, what you see are a few policy entrepreneurs really working hard to get policymakers to start doing things that not only restricted immigration, but that also started to associate in people's head the idea of immigration with law breaking and illegal actions. So I think it's really important to get the name John Tanton out there, because he put a lot of money and work into building a network that was campaigning for decades to try and get to the point that Stephen Miller has now pushed us to. So you know, this is where we are, but it is not necessarily where we have to be. And I think Anil's right. These are changes that are not intended to be temporary; they're intended to be permanent. As to the question of like, okay, well, it's being done for reasons, right? So it's being done for public health reasons, or it's being done because immigrants are somehow taking resources away from U.S. citizens. Like, those cases get very hard to make, right? So, well, we're not issuing green cards to people from outside who are coming into the U.S. from outside the country right now, but like there actually are provisions for short-term workers to enter the country. So I'm not sure where we get a public health justification that's going to hold up there. It's going to have devastating economic consequences down the road. The fact that we're shutting doors right now in ways that will hurt the very people you identified, people who need a robust economy. When you shut immigration down, and we now have really interesting studies going back to a few other times when a closure or a pause has succeeded, you don't see the things that people who have kind of an intuitive understanding only would expect. Like, it doesn't raise wages for U.S. citizens. Jobs don't become available. What happens? The economy shrinks. And in many cases, businesses and industries that rely on immigrant workers either automate or vanish, right? Which is not actually good for U.S. citizens. So, you know, this sense that this is something we're doing on purpose for reasons doesn't hold up very well.
Thank you, folks. You're listening to a conversation about U.S. immigration policy with two great experts, Elizabeth Cohen, who is professor at Syracuse University, and Professor Anil Kalhan, who's a professor of law at Drexel University. I just want to show you some of the reactions that come in, including, and by the way, please follow them at Elixabeth and at Kalhan on Twitter. But I want to show you this amazing response we just got. Rosemary Aquilina says, great topic, Sree. Now, those of you who follow the news know that Judge Rosemary Aquilina is the person who put away Larry Nassar in the USA Gymnastics scandal and put him away for a very long time. Thank you for being here, Judge. Thank you for being who you are and for giving those women a chance to speak. If you remember, they were not going to get a chance to speak. It wasn't expected, but she let every one of them speak, and it had such an impact for women and all society when those were seen on TV. So thank you, Judge, and thank you for being here. Judge Aquilina has been on one of my shows. Please go to my YouTube channel where you can find all our shows at Sreenet, SREENET on YouTube, and you can see all our live shows. And thank you, Judge, again. But we also want to show you, both Anil and Elizabeth, the other side of this. On Twitter, the trolls are out. And if I can show you, somebody says, please leave the US. We do not need any more Indians. And this is, of course, there's a very sad joke in here somewhere about what these people did to the Native Americans that were here. And now they're referring, of course, to Indians like Anil and myself. And these people who somehow manage to find these shows, and they just seem to spend their time going and throwing these bombs and running away and not engaging in any manner. But let's go to Professor Kalhan, Anil Kalhan, who's at Kalhan on Twitter. I know you engage with people on Twitter yourself. Some of your thoughts so far.
Yeah, so I just want to pick up on what Elizabeth is saying about the public health justification being questionable, because I think this is something that does get lost in the discussion, because the president, whenever criticized about the public health response, has turned to say, well, I shut down immigration, I shut down travel from China. And of course, that isn't true, right? That there's the number of people coming from the places where these restrictions have been placed, people have continued to come. They've been citizens, they've been permanent residents. The shutdown, to the extent there has been one, has been of non-US citizens. And really it came too late, because by the time those measures were being imposed, there was already community transmission within the United States. So to the extent that there was potentially a plausible public health justification, you have on the one hand, these measures, which are half measures. And then on the other hand, you have the other side of the immigration machine of the federal government has been not taking public health measures that would in fact be appropriate. So for example, it is well known and been well documented that some of the real hotspots of transmission are places where people are congregate, in detention facilities, prisons, and courthouses, courtrooms. So even as the state and federal courts were taking measures to close, and the Trump administration was justifying these other measures that it was taking to exclude people from coming to the United States, the immigration courts were operating as usual with people in close contact with each other, to the point where you had a very unusual advocacy moment where the immigration judges, side by side with the immigration lawyers, side by side with the prosecutors, all of their representatives were jointly advocating to the administration to say, none of what we need to shut the courts down from a public health perspective, if you're really serious about the public health concerns that are animating the other things that you're doing. Similarly with detention, I mean, we have people, these are hotspots where people are extremely vulnerable. And, now there's been some efforts to release some numbers of people over time in a very haphazard way. I would not say that it's been consistent, and it's not sort of been enough. And some of it has been really only at the behest of courts. But of course, courts in the context, we can talk more about this, in the context of the immigration system, courts tend to be hands off. So really, there's a Janus-faced inconsistency with what the overall picture of what the immigration process has been looking like, what the immigration system has been doing from a public health perspective.
And do you think that people are paying attention enough to this?
I don't think enough people are paying attention, in part because it's the details can get complicated, and a lot of this is also not very visible. So yeah, immigration has, in general, even before the pandemic, I mean, I think the way in which immigration enters into public discourse is often not very productive and not very, focused where it needs to be. And of course, I think in this moment, there are a lot of things to pay attention to. And I think a lot of these concerns have fallen by the wayside.
And I think you're right. Folks, we have about 20 minutes left with our guests. If Professor Cohen and Professor Kalhan can stay, we've got lots of questions coming in, so we want to ask those as well. Brushali says hello from New York City, and Ashok is watching from a rainy Trivandrum in Kerala, where my parents live. Oh, and there's my mom. Hi, Mom. Great to see you. She is also here almost every morning at 6:30 in the morning there, and she tunes in. I don't know when I'll get to go back, but love you, Amma. Thank you for being here. And Pradnya says, proud immigrant, absolutely. And I just wanted to show this T-shirt, immigrants, we get the job done. And this one of the lines that we heard, of course, in Hamilton, which celebrates an immigrant from a different context and a different era from today. Let's look at some of the other questions and comments that are coming in, and please ask about any question that you like. We can definitely give you a chance to talk to the professor. So let's talk about each of your work as well. Professor Cohen, tell us how your journey. How did you become a professor at Syracuse University? How did you focus on immigration? What is your backstory?
Well, part of my backstory is that I'm the daughter of an immigrant, a refugee who came to the United States, excuse me, because of luck at a time when it was very difficult for refugees post World War II to enter the United States. So I guess the backstory is that when you recognize that you have benefited from luck, you try and make sure that as many other people as possible have opportunities that they deserve. And so that may be why I ended up working on immigration and rights as a topic. I'm also a political theorist. I deal with abstract ideas. So I like thinking about things like making people wait and what kinds of costs that imposes on people. So I'm interested in all these delays that tend to deny people rights. So that is kind of where I entered this research, and came to Syracuse because that was where they were going to let me do the most of it.
And then this particular book, how did that fit into your research, and how did you know this was the right time to write this?
I felt a sense of urgency. I'd actually been working on something a little bit different, and an editor approached me and said, this is something that feels really politically salient. And I agreed with everything that he had to say. I wrote the book. I dropped everything. And as Anil knows, I worked like a crazy person for about 6 months trying to get a draft done because it felt like we were in crisis. The real truth is that I started my academic research in the mid-1990s, and really the crisis started then in the Clinton administration when it became possible to incarcerate such large numbers of people, immigrants, and both documented and undocumented. And I think that a point that Anil made about people we have incarcerated right now is really important. I don't know how many people listening will have read this, but yesterday there was a Washington Post article in which they observed what was going on in Georgia, I think in Alpharetta, Georgia, and kind of how comfortable people are being out right now, out and about in a state that's not locked down. And there's a comment in there about a woman who'd observed, I look at the demographics that this is hitting and it's not really me, which is code for many things, class and race. Right. And I just thought to myself, we will eventually not be incarcerating everybody who's in immigrant incarceration and in prison right now. We may deport some people to other parts of the world. Some people may be released. There may be a very high death toll, but there's no wall anybody can build that is going to protect her from that, the down the road consequences there. So, and a lot of that goes back, well before Trump ever came into office.
Yeah, I just want to point out a comment from Lambert, who says that Obama deported more African immigrants than any president, and yet what Trump has done is beyond just deportations, but also the tribal rhetoric that hyped a certain fear of immigrants, even legal ones, and invariably exacerbated the racial tensions. Anil, what do you say?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, what Elizabeth says, I've had a sort of a parallel path to coming to these issues as Elizabeth. In fact, I think we were both in grad school and law school around the same time in the 1990s when there was a wave of xenophobia, Proposition 187 in California in 1994 sort of then became nationalized. And under the Clinton administration, one of the formative moments that I remember in law school is when the Clinton administration signed into law these really restrictive and harsh immigration laws that I think didn't really come into public consciousness in the way that they might have, because the strategy that was taken to prevent things from being even worse was to split off legal immigration and preserve robust legal immigration while implementing really, really harsh measures targeting people with criminal convictions and broadening the number of people who are affected by those, imposing limits on asylum seekers, a number of different things that were put into law, ramped up by the Clinton administration, but then really after 9/11 under the Bush presidency, preserved and expanded under the Obama presidency, and really, the Trump presidency, it would be a mistake to say that Trump and Obama are the same. That would not be correct. But we do have this inherited bipartisan commitment to harshness on immigration, or at least with respect to some categories of immigrants that are very large, that really has not been reckoned with. I mean, I think we had a lost opportunity during the Democratic presidential primary to surface these issues, right? Is it enough? There's some candidates in the primary sort of would give a hint that it's just enough to take Trump out of the picture and go back to sort of the status quo before that. And then, you had Julian Castro, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, sort of surfacing a different kind of message, which is that we really need to rethink the decades-long approach to immigration in the same way that advocates have been trying to urge a reckoning about mass incarceration and the criminal legal system. They're parallel developments that are not identical. But they overlap in some ways, and I think that is something that is a reckoning that will remain, even if Vice President Biden wins the election in November.
I just want to point out this emerging immigration scholars conference. There's a whole series of ways in which scholars of immigration connect. Can you talk a little bit about that, Anil? And where can people go to learn more about the kind of study of immigration and immigration policy?
So, yeah, I mean, there are these gatherings of immigration law professors that happen every year, every other year.
There's a huge party, right? I bet you guys are just like party animals, or what?
It's mostly group therapy at this point. Comparing how tired everyone is and exhausted. There's a great initiative called #ImmigrationSyllabus. I believe Elizabeth will correct me if she remembers it better. I think it's #ImmigrationSyllabus, where scholars across a range of different disciplines that study immigration pulled together resources for folks who are not immersed in these issues to learn more. That would be a good place to start, really, I think. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you have other thoughts about.
Yeah, we've got in our political science, immigration and migration and citizenship scholar section also has an open syllabus bank. So you can look at the syllabi, the readings on a variety of different immigration and citizenship related courses and kind of pick and choose some stuff. So that's an opportunity for people who want to dig around to find readings.
And the #ImmigrationSyllabus, if that is indeed the hashtag, was inspired by the Ferguson syllabus. After Ferguson, I think there was a similar initiative, and then others have followed, Puerto Rico syllabus, and so on.
And the idea is that people read more and understand what's happening. So let's look at some of these comments that are coming in. Eduardo says, "Greetings from Miami, grandson of an immigrant and an immigrant myself. Well done." And look at this now on the other side. Love how the word illegal just gets dropped or replaced with undocumented. So if I can ask Elizabeth to explain both the kind of politics, the rhetorical politics of the term undocumented, but also why it is the appropriate term.
So it's, I think, been over 5 years now. It's been the AP approved term, or that illegal is not AP.
AP, you mean the Associated Press? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
So it's recommended that we not use the word illegal, in part because it doesn't mean very much. It doesn't refer to anything in particular, any particular type of status. Being undocumented also includes several different types of legal relationships to the United States. So it can be people who've overstayed visas. It can be people about whose paperwork, there were mistakes involved in. It can be people who crossed without an inspection, some of whom may have been planning to apply for asylum. So it's also a catch-all. But what's illegal? Am I illegal at a party if I was speeding in my car and broke a law when I got there? Am I an illegal partier? It just doesn't really do us any particular service, and so we don't use it. People who are committed to using that word usually have an emotional but not a particularly substantive investment in doing so, and that connects us back to the idea of cruelty and theater, rather than dealing with issues dispassionately in a way that's practical and useful and principled.
We want to point out that Rose Horowitz, one of our producers, is tweeting at Rose Horowitz 31, and she gives a shout out to Sapphire, the author. Some of you know she was with us on Thursday. She's the author of the novel that became Precious, the Oscar-winning movie, and she said the following in a public comment. She said, "I've brought into the public gaze women who have been marginalized by sexual abuse, poverty, and their blackness. Through art, I have sought to center them in the world." It was an amazing evening with Sapphire to hear her and her righteous anger about everything from immigration policy to where we are in the world. And I encourage all of you to go back into our archives at youtube.com/SreeNet and please watch that video. We laughed, we teared up, but we understood that one of the things that this country has done is pit poor African Americans against other poor folks, and poor white people against poor immigrants, and how all of that has shaped the world. And it's very, very tragic. Anil, we have another comment here from someone who is we've got the trolls out. So what can we do? We could ignore them, but it's illustrative of some of the thinking that's there. So I'm only picking the things that we can show. And one of them is this. So you think criminals should just come here? My God, puzzling. And you know that one of the many brushes that was used to tarnish Hillary Clinton was the idea that she believed in open borders. So can you frame that debate for us and what is really going on, Anil?
Yeah, sure. I mean, since we were talking about this in the context of the laws that were enacted in the mid-1990s, I mean, before those laws, it was the case that somebody could be deported for the most serious of crimes. If there had been, at the same time, they also had the opportunity to show that they were warranted an exercise of discretion not to be deported. What happened in the 1990s was this on steroids expansion, such that minor crimes committed by, often many years ago by longtime residents, people who may have come to the United States, as children, it really was sort of this much broader expansion, and not. The comment that you read is about letting criminals come here, but most of what the conduct that is taking place that is targeted is conduct of people who are in the United States, who are Americans in many respects, in most everyday respects, and with an enormous amount of severity that really is out of proportion to whatever the deportation is, can be the loss of everything worth living. Many people who face deportation don't know their country of origin. If they've committed a minor drug offense or shoplifting or something like that, does that warrant? Is it proportionate to say that you are going to be deported from the United States, uprooted from the country where you have your family and the ties in the community? You may, in fact, actually have, served whatever criminal sentence the criminal legal system has imposed, which may not even be that severe a sentence, right? We've collectively decided that people who commit a certain offense must serve X amount of time in prison or pay a fine. These individuals, like US citizens who have done the same conduct, what justifies the differential treatment and such a severe response? And until the 1990s, that was how we thought about most of these convictions.
And so can you, either of you, if you're comfortable, just lay out what is going to happen now with the new pause, as I always put it in quote marks, because the pause is what is being referred to by the White House. They have no reason for us to believe that it's anything temporary. What is keeping them from just extending this for a long time? That's my question. Well, that's one of my questions. And the other is that when I meet immigrants who are from, say, India, they believe that this president will always take care of what they call, the skilled immigrants or the engineers from the Indian Institutes of Technology and places like that, and that he has some love for them. And I tell them that President Trump would rather have, a fisherman from Norway come here, but the Norwegians say, no, thanks, we don't want to come. So they have no love for skilled versus unskilled. And by the way, people we were calling skilled and now suddenly unskilled we're now suddenly are essential. So Elizabeth, can you reflect on some of that for us?
Yeah, I think there's probably a bit of a lag in some people's sense of what direction things are going, often because it's difficult to confront great risk. We try and reassure ourselves that we're safe. I see it in my own profession with people assuming that they will not be hurt by cuts to higher ed. And of course, nobody's invulnerable. And I think that may be kind of a psychological process in which people are trying to reassure themselves, because the consequences of confronting reality would be really devastating. But in fact, I don't think that we have any reason to believe that the Trump administration is going to protect any categories of immigrants. There's just no evidence that that's what's going to happen. And so I think that eventually that's going to be absolutely undeniable. I think, there's already lots and lots of ways in which they've nibbled away at the rights of, people like to say skilled work visas. I tend to say high paid because of course there's a lot of skill that goes into work that people do on other types of visas. But, it's just undeniable that the Trump administration wants to halt immigration. And, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens now that we're in a position in which the closure of borders, which has heretofore been something that's mostly been about people trying to get into the U.S., is now going to start impacting people who want to leave the United States. And what's going to happen now that there's plenty of reason for people all over the world, governments all over the world, to question whether they should be welcoming people from the country, to get back to the theme of the podcast, with the worst possible COVID response. What is it going to mean when we can't travel? And you may have listeners who are like, well, I don't want to travel and people shouldn't want to travel. Why should people be leaving the country? Or this doesn't affect me. But everybody is affected when people can't move freely. They may not need to do it, but something they need relies on people being able to move freely. And that hardening of the borders is going to matter in both directions.
Thank you. We're just looking at your Twitter feed. First of all, you have a wonderful Twitter handle, Elizabeth, and your Twitter name you've made, Dr. Elizabeth Sasha Baroness Cohen. Tell us what people will find if they follow you. What is your personality on Twitter? Obviously, it's not your typical professor. So tell us about that a little bit.
I don't even know what a typical professor ought to be on Twitter because, of course, professors predate Twitter, but you will find oversharing and immigration news and discussions of lots of things that I'm attempting to cook while on lockdown, some of which are going okay and some of which have not turned out that well. Yeah, so it's a mixture of personal and politics.
Yeah, and you're commenting about COVID in various ways, including its effect on higher education. So now let's take a look at Anil's Twitter handle. And you are not expecting Ariana Grande on a professor's feed either, I think, or whoever that is. So Anil, talk to us about @Kalhan.
Well, the reason why Ariana Grande is at the banner photo is because if you were to look carefully at what she is reading with her dog, that is an immigration law textbook. It's the previous edition of the textbook that I will be joining the next edition as a co-author of. So Ariana Grande is a not little known fact about Ariana Grande is that she is very well versed in immigration law, and those other books you can see on the side are also various legal textbooks. Yeah, I mean, I have a similar sense of quirkiness about what I tweet. It's a decent amount of immigration law related issues and international human rights issues and other rule of law constitutional questions, and along with just, other random things that pop in.
Sure. Rylan says, I disagree 110%, so just you should know. And then Mark asked, where are we in relation to sanctuary cities and dreamers in the coronavirus era? We don't hear much about it now. We have just a couple more minutes, so that'd be one of the good final questions. We have some more coming in, but Anil, you want to take that?
Yeah, so there's ongoing litigation still about the Trump presidency's efforts to retaliate against so-called sanctuary cities, and those are still pending in courts and moving along. I recently just worked with some professors on an amicus brief, or signed on to an amicus brief that was being filed in one of those cases. Dreamers, the Supreme Court has before it right now a case on the fate of DACA and the Trump presidency's efforts to cancel DACA and whether they will allow the executive branch to do that. Interesting, in this moment, there's been a lot of attention, or maybe not enough attention, but some attention to the fact that beneficiaries of DACA have also, to a significant degree, been in frontline positions in response to the pandemic. So I think it's, based on how the oral argument went, it's not likely that the Supreme Court is going to put any severe roadblock in the ability of the Trump administration to cancel DACA. That doesn't mean that the beneficiaries of DACA will be immediately deported, but they'll be vulnerable right away. And, the question is then, well, how will the members of Congress and the Trump presidency respond if that's what happens? Because, it may be that they want to come up with some kind of legislative solution.
Sure. I just want to read through a couple of comments, and then each of you give us kind of a final thought to wrap up. Pradnya says, I have an irrational fear as a naturalized citizen that I will not be able to get my passport renewed under a second Trump term. Nitin says he's watching from Dharamshala in India, where the Dalai Lama lives. Elizabeth, in that case, there seems to be a case for tech firms moving en masse to India. My father watching from India. Hi, Acha. Great to see you. Love you. Nothing baffles the world as much as U.S. immigration laws. And he says, thank you for clearing some of the cobwebs. So my dad is a hard grader. So if he gives you a compliment, that's pretty good. So why don't we use those as a comment or for you to give us your kind of final thoughts. Sorry, one more. Joe says, companies do not offer visas any longer unless the employee is extremely high up on the food chain or in a highly specialized role. So if you can wrap up as many of those or none of those, Elizabeth, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, apropos of this question about, companies moving themselves, like when I said this was not going to be good for the U.S. economy, it wasn't like a, kind of opportunistic argument because I'm somehow irrationally committed to crazy open border schemes. It's going to be terrible for the U.S. economy. It's going to be terrible for the people who have been manipulated emotionally into this irrational hatred and fear. And, yeah, there may be reasons for lots and lots of businesses to look elsewhere. Every time I see a new regulation, something, that's being done to discourage people from coming to the country, to abuse people trying to enter the country, to abuse people who are in the country, picture one of the capillaries of our economy and our society being cauterized and closed off. And, this will be really consequential for lots of towns that were trying to make economic turnarounds that depend on their colleges for economic life. As visas become hard to get, it will be difficult for businesses who rely on foreign-born workers because there aren't U.S. born workers who will do that work. And it's just really incredibly damaging to our reputation as well. So in every way, I think this is just the most self-defeating possible course of action for everybody except the person who's running to be reelected right now.
Yeah, Mark says some of my friends are professors at NCCU, Duke, and I agree, no such thing as a typical professor on Twitter, and Elizabeth Cohen is not a typical professor on Twitter. Please follow her at Elixabeth, and her book is called Illegal: How America's Lawless Immigration Regime Threatens Us All. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being with us. We appreciate you and your time. Good luck with the book. I know it came out just at kind of the, in a way, a hard time for an author to get it out there, but no better time than for us to think about these issues in the middle of everything else. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was Professor Elizabeth Cohen. Now let's go to Professor Kalhan from Drexel University. Professor Cohen is at Syracuse. Go ahead, Anil.
So I just want to come back to your earlier question about whether we should expect the initiatives that have been implemented now to be temporary. And the Trump administration has signaled pretty clearly that they regard these initiatives as part of a longer-term strategy, right? That they're really looking opportunistically to use these measures as a way of targeting asylum seekers, as a way of targeting prospective permanent residents from outside the United States. And so it's not a question really of guessing or speculating. They have been very clear about this. Stephen Miller, in his calls with outside restrictionists who were angry that the president didn't go far enough, he reassured them, no, just think of the longer term effect that these measures will have. And in fact, actually, I think I saw a headline today that the next step is to shut down H-1B visas and other employment, temporary non-immigrant visas. And they'll probably be doing that as part of this longer term effort. And, to your dad's point about the immigration laws, nothing baffles, he's right, even for immigration lawyers and law professors. And, part of what I think the last, not just the last 2 months, but the last 2.5 years has shown is, again, just the point that comes through very clearly in Elizabeth's book, and that I was also suggesting earlier in the conversation, which is that we have this longer term dysfunction in our immigration laws that enabled this presidency to take advantage of, provisions that nobody was paying attention to and provisions that people thought nobody would ever use. And really, it is definitely a task for the next Congress and the next administration to not just think, well, we've taken, if it's assuming that it's Vice President Biden who wins, that it's not enough to just take Trump out of the equation and call it a day. There is a broader, longer-term accumulated set of concerns and problems that need to be reckoned with.
Can I ask you one thing that I see from the comments? Should the immigrants be worried because they're here already? There's a chance that they may not be safe as they think, even if they are citizens and if they think they have a green card, all of those processes. should they be worried?
I mean, I think that there's lots of reasons for all of us to be worried about what is happening. Will everybody be vulnerable who might be from an immigrant background or who's here? No, I don't think that's the case. But, part of the strategy here is to create fear and to create discouragement. So when I hear questions like that, on the one hand, I want to acknowledge that the fear is well-founded and real. At the same time, I want to encourage people not to internalize it in a way that, in fact, actually, is going to make folks panic or undermine their own health and well-being. Right? There's a lot of things that are associated with this, with the cultivation of fear. Right? It's to the point of the cruelty is the point that you were referencing earlier in Adam Stewart's article. That I also want to encourage people to find ways to resist.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. We could have continued for a long time, but it's already 10 o'clock Eastern. Thank you very much to Anil Kalhan, professor at Drexel School of Law, and Elizabeth Cohen, who is a professor at Syracuse University. Thank you both very much. We wish you the very best. Hope you'll come back and enlighten us in the future. I hope I won't still be doing the show. It's been 68 straight days, and I promise to do it as long as we're in lockdown, and we're hoping that we'll come out one of these days. But thank you very much, and good luck.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye. And thanks to both of them for being here. But don't leave yet. We want to do a couple of housekeeping things that are also interesting. First, we want to tell you that we have a course, that I have a free course that's being offered. I'd love all of you to sign up for it. You all know a person of any age who would benefit from fundamentals of social media for journalists, PR pros, and everyone, a free certification course. You can sign up at Muckrack Academy, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. We did this because we wanted people to get more skills during this time. As things are under lockdown, you can pick up a free certification of a course that Linda Bernstein and I are putting together, my colleague of many years. We've taught together around the world and worked together, and she's a fabulous teacher as well, and you're going to learn a lot. So please take a screenshot or take a photo with your phone and send this to your family and friends and tell them to sign up. We'd love to have them join us. mrac.co/social. mrac.co/social. The hashtag is MRA Social. All right. Now we wanted to do a shout out to our other sponsor, and that is Sohn Social Media Solutions, and their course, which is called Social Media Solutions. SohnSocialMediaSolutions.com presents Survive with Live Video Bootcamp. But instead of my just reading it, we thought it would be exciting to have Tim Sohn here. And here he is. Hi, Tim.
Hi, Sree. How are you?
You're way past your bedtime. I know you're somebody who's in bed much earlier, but thank you for staying up. Thank you for sponsoring my show. You were the very first person 68 days ago to sponsor us, and that was a lovely gesture and very meaningful to me. Bruce Springsteen says he never forgot who gave him his first $10 to play guitar professionally, and I've gotten other money for other sponsorships, but for this show, it was very meaningful. So thank you, Tim, and tell us about the show and why people should take it.
Absolutely. So thank you so much.
Sorry, I called it a course, but I mean a show. Yeah,
that's okay. Thank you so much, Sree, for letting me be your first sponsor and to be back again as a sponsor. So Survive with Live Video Bootcamp is a bootcamp for anyone. It could be someone who's a business owner, who's a marketer, who has or is involved in a nonprofit organization. Anybody who wants to get a message out and keep it out there through the power of live video, live streaming. So whether you want to go live on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or YouTube, or very similar to what Sree is doing right here with his amazing shows. So how this program works is it's a 2-month course, and we cover everything from how to get you past the fear of going on video, which could be a big challenge for a lot of people, to what should you talk about on your live videos anyway, to how do you get people to actually show up for your live videos once you start producing them, and so much more. And the really awesome thing about this course is that we have an awesome private Facebook group. And so we're all practicing to create live videos at first, right, in this private Facebook group together. So we're showing up and we're supporting each other as we do our live videos together. And then in month 2 of the program, we actually embark onto our own social networks and launch our own shows, which is really cool. So, so thank you, Sree, for allowing me to be a sponsor. In round 1, we've had so many amazing shows launched already. There's one show that's called Romping Radishes Live, which is a children's story time. Julia Weeks has launched her show. The Navy Yard show. Yeah, thank you, Sree. And so many others. We've had everybody from realtors to nonprofit organizations to career coaches. Last night, just 2 of the people in our program, somebody who's a career coach in North Carolina and somebody who is in India. We're doing a show together on Facebook at 11:30 at night that I stayed up for. So I would not have been able to do that without being a sponsor of Sree's show. That global community, I would have never ever imagined that would have happened. So thank you, Sree. And if anybody wants to sign up, Sohn, SOHN, socialmediasolutions.com, and the course starts January 1st. So sign up.
June 1st.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did I say?
January.
I need to go to bed.
Yes, you do. Thanks very much, Tim, and thank you for your sponsorship. And folks, Tim paid extra for showing up on video here, but otherwise our rates are very, very manageable, and we'd love to have you join us as a sponsor, and we are very grateful to Tim. So thank you, Tim. Bye.
Thank you, Sree. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. A couple of quick things. Please go to my YouTube page and become a subscriber. We have so many great shows. We have spoken to more than 130 people on this show, and we're very proud of the quality of our guests, but we're looking for guests, themes, topics, and sponsors. So please email me. You see my email address right there. You see my Twitter handle. Please connect, and also my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Sreenet. That's the best way to keep up with all my shows. And then for you, I also have this WhatsApp QR code. So pull out your phone right now and hold it up to the camera. Hold up your camera to the QR code. If you're using an iPhone, you'll be able to get a link to my WhatsApp alerts. It is not another WhatsApp group full of racists. It is your way to just get an alert from me, a ping, quiet ping, when I am live. And I'm so grateful to everybody for watching. Please email me, Sree@Sree.net, if you have any questions, and we'd love to see you on my free global course that we're doing with Muckrack Academy. Please check it out. Fundamentals of Social Media for journalists, PR pros, and everyone. Free certification course. Save your seats. mrac.co/social. mrac.co/social. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And any questions and comments, welcome. We have so many great comments and folks coming in here. We're so grateful to everybody. Thank you and goodbye, everyone. See you.